You said you'd start tomorrow. You swore this time would be different. You made a solemn vow to yourself in the mirror, in your journal, in your head, at 2 a.m. when the shame was loudest. And then you broke it. Again. Not because you're weak, not because you lack willpower, but because you're fighting the wrong war entirely. Breaking promises to yourself isn't a discipline problem. It's an identity crisis. Every broken promise is a message you're sending to your subconscious. I don't believe in me, and your subconscious is listening. It's keeping score, and after enough broken promises, it stops believing anything you say. The ancient Greeks had a concept for this, Akrasia, acting against your better judgment. Socrates thought it was impossible. He believed that if you truly know what's good for you, you'll do it. But Aristotle saw deeper. He understood that knowledge alone changes nothing. You can know exactly what you should do and still watch yourself do the opposite, like a passenger in your own life. This is the gap between knowing and being. You know you should exercise. You know you should create instead of consume. You know you should have the difficult conversation. But knowledge sits in your prefrontal cortex while your habits live in your basal ganglia, the ancient part of your brain that runs on autopilot. And autopilot always wins when you're tired, stressed, or distracted, which is most of the time. Here's what nobody explains. Every promise you make creates a psychological debt. And unlike financial debt, you can't declare bankruptcy on it. It accumulates. The promise to write that novel, the promise to quit that addiction, the promise to finally pursue what matters. Each broken promise doesn't disappear, it compounds, creating a background radiation of disappointment that colors everything you touch. Now let's look at why this matters historically. The 1960s gave us the Stanford marshmallow experiment. Kids who could delay gratification, resist eating one marshmallow to get two later, showed better life outcomes decades later. The researchers thought they'd discovered the secret, willpower. But recent replications revealed something crucial they missed. The kids who waited weren't more disciplined. They trusted the promise. They believed the adult would actually come back with the second marshmallow. The kids who grabbed the first marshmallow immediately, they'd learned from experience that promises get broken. That waiting means losing. That trusting future rewards is for suckers. They weren't undisciplined. They were realistic about broken promises in their environment. You are both the adult and the child in your own life. And if you keep breaking promises to yourself, you're teaching yourself that your own word means nothing. The Stoics knew this. Seneca wrote extensively about making your word law. Not to others, that's easy. To yourself, that's the crucible. Epictetus taught that freedom begins with keeping the small promises. Don't say you'll wake up early if you won't. Don't claim you'll change if you're not ready. Every broken promise to yourself is a chain you forge, link by link, until you're imprisoned by your own unreliability. But here's where it gets psychologically sophisticated. Modern neuroscience reveals why this pattern is so vicious. When you make a promise, your brain releases dopamine in anticipation. The promise itself feels good. You get a hit of pleasure just from deciding to change. This is why New Year's resolutions feel so euphoric. You're getting the reward for the change before you've done anything. Then comes the actual work. The dopamine fades. The effort feels unrewarded. Your brain says, I already got paid for this decision. Why am I still working? So you quit. And the worst part, your brain learns that the promise itself is the reward. You become addicted to promising, to planning, to deciding, because that's where the dopamine is. The actual follow-through, that's just pain with no payoff. This is the neurochemical trap. Deciding feels like accomplishing. So you keep breaking promises, because breaking them is more rewarding than keeping them. The promise gives you the high. The breaking gives you the excuse. And the cycle repeats, each iteration making you trust yourself less. The Buddhist concept of samsara, the cycle of suffering, applies here perfectly. You're trapped in a wheel of your own making. Promise, break, shame, promise, break, shame. Around and around. The wheel turns and you think you're making progress because you're moving, but you're actually going nowhere. The promise is the illusion of change. The breaking is the reality of stagnation. Carl Jung saw this pattern in his patients. He called it the shadow, the part of yourself you refuse to integrate. Every broken promise creates shadow material. All the versions of yourself you claimed you'd become, abandoned and buried, accumulating in the unconscious. And that shadow grows heavier, darker, more powerful. Until one day you look in the mirror and don't recognize yourself because the person staring back is defined more by what they've abandoned than what they've achieved. So what do you actually do about this? Because understanding the problem isn't the same as solving it. First, stop making promises you don't intend to keep. This sounds obvious, but it's radical. Most people make promises for how they'll feel, not for what they'll do. I'll start eating healthy. That's not a promise, that's a wish disguised as intention. A real promise has a specific action, a timeline, and a cost for breaking it. Say instead, I will eat vegetables at dinner every Monday and Thursday for the next 2 weeks, or I will donate $50 to a cause I hate. Make it so specific that breaking it feels real. Second, start with promises so small that breaking them would be absurd. Don't promise to write a novel. Promise to write 1 sentence per day. Don't promise to transform your life. Promise to make your bed every morning for a week. The point isn't the achievement, it's rebuilding trust with yourself. You're teaching your subconscious that when you say something, it happens. Start small, stack success, let the evidence accumulate. Third, create visible accountability. Not to others, that's external motivation that fades. Accountability to yourself. Keep a promise journal. Every day, write what you promised and what you did. The gap between those 2 columns is your integrity gap. Watch it close over time or watch it widen. But don't lie to yourself about it. The journal doesn't judge, but it doesn't forget either. Fourth, understand the difference between outcome promises and process promises. I will lose 20 pounds. That's an outcome promise. You don't have complete control over it. I will go to the gym 4 times per week. That's a process promise. You have total control. Outcome promises set you up for failure because variables beyond your control can break them. Process promises put success entirely in your hands. Promise the process. Let the outcomes follow. Fifth, implement what psychologists call if-then planning. Don't just promise what you'll do. Promise what you'll do when obstacles arise. If I feel too tired to work out, then I will do 10 push-ups instead. If I want to scroll social media, then I will read 1 page of a book first. You're not resisting temptation, you're redirecting it. You're giving your brain a compromise that still honors the promise. Sixth, recognize that shame is the mind killer. When you break a promise, your instinct is to spiral into shame. I'm so undisciplined, I'm such a failure, I'll never change. That shame doesn't motivate you, it paralyzes you. It makes the next promise harder to keep because you're already convinced you'll break it. Instead, treat broken promises like data. I promised X and did Y. What made that happen? What can I adjust? Curiosity, not shame. Investigation, not flagellation. Seventh, build a promise ecosystem. One promise alone is fragile, but promises that support each other become a structure. Promise to sleep 8 hours, that makes the promise to work out easier. Promise to work out, that makes the promise to eat well easier. Promise to eat well, that makes the promise to sleep better easier. They reinforce each other, creating a web of integrity instead of isolated commitments hanging in the void. Here's what happens when you actually do this work. At first, it feels mechanical. You're going through the motions, checking boxes, feeling nothing. But keep going, because something subtle starts to shift. You begin to notice a different feeling when you look at yourself. Not pride, that's too loud. It's quieter. It's self-respect. The kind that doesn't announce itself but sits in your chest like ballast, keeping you steady when everything else rocks. You stop negotiating with yourself. When you say you'll do something, the conversation is over. There's no internal debate, no bargaining, no maybe later. You said it, so it happens. And this changes everything. Because suddenly you have access to the most powerful force in human psychology, self-trust. You trust yourself to do hard things, to start, to continue, to finish. That trust is the foundation everything else is built on. The promises stop being about the specific action and become about who you are. You're not someone who exercises. You're someone who keeps their word, and today their word included exercise. You're not someone who creates. You're someone who honors commitments, and today you committed to creating. The identity shifts from the behavior to the character trait beneath it. And here's the paradox. Once you become someone who keeps promises to yourself, you become free to break them. Because you're not breaking them out of weakness or fear, you're consciously choosing to revise them based on new information. That's not failure, that's adaptation. The difference is you're in control. You're not a victim of your own unreliability. You're the author of your own evolution. Viktor Frankl, who survived unspeakable horror, discovered that the one freedom that can never be taken is the freedom to choose your response. You can't control circumstances. You can't control outcomes, but you can control whether you keep your word to yourself. That's the last great freedom, and it's the only one that truly matters. The people who change the world, who build empires, who create art that echoes through time, they're not more talented than you. They're not more disciplined. They're just more trustworthy to themselves. When they commit, they follow through. Not perfectly, not without struggle, but consistently. And that consistency, compounded over years, becomes unstoppable. So here's the truth you need to face. Every broken promise is a vote for the person you don't want to be. Every kept promise is a vote for the person you're becoming. And you're casting votes every single day. The election never ends. The results are always being tallied. The question is, who are you electing? You already know what you need to do. You've known for a long time. The promise is sitting there, waiting. Not the big, dramatic, impossible promise, the small one. The one you could keep today, right now. The one that would prove to yourself that your word still means something. So stop reading, stop thinking, stop preparing for some mythical future moment when you'll finally be ready. Make the promise, keep it, and become the person who does what they say. That person has been waiting for you to show up. Today's the day.